Yeah, it should be okay. As long as the audio is good and you can hear me, we should be okay.
Okay.
All right, ready to do this?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Grinds My Gears. Today we got Kristen Nagle. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
And I mean, there's a lot to uh that I wanted to discuss with you, but I think the best way to kind of get the conversation going, because it's not one of those question answer things, right? It's kind of like I want you to kind of tell your story a bit, because from my perspective, a lot of wrongdoing was done to you, but your story hasn't been kind of told in the truthful manner that I anticipate you're about to say it. So, I mean, I want to kind of start where, like, when COVID kind of started, and all the nonsense kind of came on to you in terms of the media and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It seems crazy now that we're into 2023. I mean, all this was, can we believe that we're in our third year of this?
Yeah, I know.
Um, yeah. So, I guess I was aware of the lies, what they were doing when they started talking about it in 2019 December in Wuhan.
Okay.
I had been following vaccine like mandates on children, and I knew the big money maker was going to be adults. I just didn't know how they were going to enforce it on adults.
Yeah.
And then when Wuhan came, and I was like, oh, this is how they're going to do it. So I was pretty outspoken right from the beginning. And then I was still working at that time in the neonatal intensive care unit. I had was a nurse for 14 years. I spent 12 of those years in the
And
NICU.
you were in London, right?
Yeah, in London. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And then so I was speaking out kind of at work with colleagues, and at first they were, receptive, like they kind of were on the same page, like, oh, why are we worrying about a flu? Like this happens, every year.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like March 2020 where they all shifted. They bought into the fear.
Yeah.
The propaganda was heavy in the media, like we all know this. And so I just realized I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to go silent now a little bit while I was working.
Yeah.
Um, and we had to put the masks on our face and the goggles, and nurses were wearing hairnets, the whole deal. And I remember thinking, like, how are we doing this when our union just fought for us in BC and Ontario 2015 and 2018 to not wear the masks?
During flu season, right?
Yeah, exactly. If
Uh,
you didn't get the flu shot, then you had to wear a mask during flu season. And our unions fought for us and proved that masks don't stop transmission and that it's discriminatory. And we won.
yeah.
Um, and so we didn't have to wear them anymore. And then here we are just putting them right back on our faces for getting this legal fight. So, anyways, kind of that's how it was at work. It was really uncomfortable. I hated it. I was just becoming really withdrawn, just really angry when I would get home. I just hated the lies and being part of it
Yeah.
and what I was seeing happening. And then I had an opportunity. I was speaking out loudly on social media, whether it was Instagram lives, Facebook or
Yeah.
whatever, whoever I could reach. And I was getting a lot of backlash there. And then September 2020, I had an opportunity to speak at City Hall in my hometown in London about the mask mandates on children. And that video of me went viral, I think because I was a nurse and whatever I said. And then that got me connected to a lot more people. I spoke out at two freedom rallies after that in November 2020. That got me, all these reports were going into my college after that.
Yeah.
And then a friend and I hosted our own freedom rally. We organized one in London, Ontario, November 22nd, 2020, and that's when the media grabbed hold of me. And then that's when it
When
was really,
all hell broke loose, right?
yeah, exactly.
Now I wanted to kind of like, I'm sure everybody has like work stories and things where, things at work kind of suck, and then it makes you really uncomfortable. And you spoke like, you were going home and you're extremely frustrated, and it was kind of like, it almost makes you not want to nurse or do whatever you do anymore, right? Did you get that feeling, that sense from other people in your hospital, but for some reason they just, they wouldn't say anything or they wouldn't speak out?
Very, very, very few. The only reasons they were actually scared to be at work, thinking, that they were going to be bringing something home to their families,
Yeah.
and it was stressful in a different sense for them.
Yeah.
Um, but there was maybe like three um,
Okay.
that I worked with. Yeah,
So it wasn't like a prevalent kind of thought. It was kind of like everyone sort of bought into it, right?
yeah, exactly.
And which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because you're in a hospital where, science is supposed to be at the forefront of everything that you do. What is
Supposed to
it?
be.
It science is supposed to be trust the science, right? But what is it like? How were they just not reading the same data that was coming out? Because like, I'm not a freaking nurse. I'm a kin by degree, but I'm a professional fighter. I am a martial artist. I know how to read studies, right? I went to school and I can pull up a set like, were they just reading the final conclusions, or like what was the education going into them making that decision not to kind of follow what's really happening with the data? Because all along the data, as you know, showed the opposite of what was being told to the public.
Well, that's the problem, right? Because they weren't reading it. They weren't looking at anything on their own. They weren't looking at studies or reading the data or looking at it, or they weren't looking at Canadian stats of all cause mortality rates in the past several years, or mortality rates in flu in the past several years compared to what we were seeing. Like they weren't looking at it. They were just going by what the government was saying, media was saying, public health policies. And they're just doing what they're told, as now I realize is what good nurses should do. Is just
Don't que-
follow the orders, follow the policies. That's what.
don't question anybody. Just do whatever it's on the paper says to do, right?
Yeah, they trick you into thinking they're training you to be critical thinkers, but they're just training you to be indoctrinated and to think within their box.
Yes.
And it's very clever how they do it because they make you think that you're independent and that you are thinking for yourself and that you are critical. But when that veil's lifted, you realize that you're just another robot that is taught to follow orders and do what you're told.
And from your experience, do you think that that's one of the flaws of the public healthcare system, and would be fixed with kind of like a two-tiered system where, I money drives a lot of things, but the other thing is there's a lot of great science, for example, comes out of the US, and some of the clinics that are where the practitioners within the clinics are actually making more money, and they're fueled by putting it through like real science and real data.
Mhm. I think it would help in a little bit, but I actually worked for a year in the states in Arizona when I was first out of nursing school, and the problem with privatization as well is all the money that's made off of
Yes.
every single test and every diagnosis and every procedure. So they almost do too much
Okay.
that's needed in some cases. I mean, it might be different in other facilities, or there's
Yeah.
more opportunity for holistic care and things like that in the states because it is private. But where I worked, I saw a lot of unnecessary testing and procedures and things happening because of the money. So it's kind of hard to say. Like, I think we have a terrible system
Yeah.
with the way with the way it's funded. But
Yeah.
part of me thinks if we were to privatize, and things had to come out of people's pocket, that maybe it would empower them to actually take responsibility of their health, if they have
Yes.
to spend money on themselves instead of just tthinking, like, oh, they'll fix me and it's free. I
Yeah.
don't have to worry as long
That's
as they.
like, and I'm not knocking on my family here, but if anyone in my immediate family bumps their knee, they automatically want to go to see the doctor, right? And I think it's ingrained in Canadians now because it's almost so accessible, right? It
Yeah,
is accessible and it's not accessible. Like, you do have
yeah,
to wait 16 hours to see somebody, but you can still wait 16 hours and see somebody. Whereas in other healthcare settings, like in the US and different other places around the world, you're not gonna wanna spend $200-300 for the bump on your knee to get it checked out. You're gonna be like, "Okay, well, it's just swelling," or, you understand what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you are right in that sense where it does incentivize people to take a better ownership over their actual physical. Obviously, if you break your knee at a soccer game, you should probably go to the hospital. But in terms of health and well-being, and that's kind of where you've branched off to now in terms of holistic health, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. 2016, 2018, I went back to school to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition and became a holistic nutritionist. And that's where I kind of found my passion in children's health and nutrition, and uncovered the lies of childhood immunizations. And,
Yeah.
so been speaking out about that for a long time, which all got me in trouble with my college in 2018. So I
Now
guess,
let's get back to the trouble part because that's what I want to help you clear up in terms of the propaganda that's being pushed against you. Now, one of the biggest things that I saw was like, okay, you went to DC for that rally. Can you kind of explain what actually happened with that as opposed to the nonsense that is being pushed around with you with that?
yeah, well, after the media completely slandered me and defamed me after the London rally, it was NICU nurse puts premature babies in danger,
Yeah.
call me reckless and
But
whatever.
if you Google your name, the first 3 things, like, uh, you would think you were the most evil person on the planet in terms you know what I mean? You wouldn't be like if you Googled your name, you would be like, "This isn't a person who would come on a podcast and talk to somebody about, about anything. This is a terrible person that should be like, that's how bad it is in terms of what they've done to you." So
Yeah. So I found another nurse also speaking out, and I was like, oh, thank goodness. She was in Toronto, and I was like, okay, we're not alone. We reached out to some of the American nurses we knew were speaking out before us in the spring, like Nicole Siratek, Nurse Erin of the expose in New York City.
yeah,
And so we joined forces with them and organized we under the name of Global Frontline Nurses. We headed down to Washington, D.C. to speak on a health and freedom stage together, and just sharing all our concerns that we were seeing in all different areas, from long term
yeah,
care, NICU, from emerge, ICU, whatever, across, like, all different east to
spectrum.
west.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then and so it was January 6th, and Sarah and Sarah Shajunian, my other nurse, we were very naive in, the political situation that was happening in the States. I didn't follow any of it.
yeah,
So that day, like, didn't really mean anything to me. So we spoke on the health and freedom stage at 10 a.m., listened to a couple other speakers, headed back to the hotel room, for my husband to call me and say, like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. We're back in the, headed back to the hotel room. I was like, it's really noisy though, lots of, you know, police cars and sirens. And he's like,
yeah.
oh, this is what's happening. So I was like, oh, geez. So we turned on the news and we're like, well, that's crazy. And excuse me. And then, yeah, when we flew back home, we were deemed domestic terrorists. Had
Jesus.
the RCMP show up at our house for our involvement in the storming and rioting of the Capitol.
And was there even any proof at that time?
No, no.
So what was the, cause or what was the reasoning behind them labeling you that?
I think just because we were there. I had the next day, there was these 2 guys outside of my, hotel room while we were waiting for our cab to take us to the airport, and I did a little Instagram live with them and said, "Okay, well, you guys were there, like, tell us, like, what happened, what was it all about?"
Yeah,
So I got their stories, and, sorry, the little guy came in and out
it's
sleeping
all
in
right.
bed.
It's all good. It's all
Um
good. I got a 3-year-old that doesn't go to bed, so don't worry
Yes,
about that.
what's happening right now.
Yeah,
um, so I did an Instagram live with them, and that's what the media picked up, because
okay.
one of them said, his experience from the whole day. He was talking about the whole day. He's like, was
Yeah,
really loving and peaceful, and because he used those words, the media just had a blast with it, and just I think because it was not essential travel and these 2 nurses are flying, like
yeah.
all the it was so ridiculous, like, what they're
Well,
coming up with.
what really grind my gears, and this is why I really wanted to talk to you, was because, I saw the post of what they're doing in the universities right now in the
Yeah.
colleges with the nurses. And as someone that's completely out of that field, that's none of my expertise, none of my business, but to me, it was disgusting to see that. And as somebody who myself is educated and went to university, when I was there, and like I'm not even that old, right? So it wasn't that long ago. None of that was acceptable. There wasn't case studies on people um, that was false accusations. Like the one that you posted and you could hear the professor talking about how, she was there and, that's what you get when you storm I guess she when you storm the Capitol. And I'm like, you're supposed to be an educator of higher learning. You're supposed to be educating the young minds, not influencing, not putting your political beliefs, not ideologies, nothing. You're supposed to be in all essence, giving what's from the textbooks to the kids and letting them learn, and then a good learner will morph that into great medicine and a great practice, right? Instead, what was being done there, and I find it absolutely disgusting what's going on in universities and in all schools for that matter, was it was slander, and that's 100% what it was. Now I wanted to kinda ask, like, why are they doing that to you? Is there, like, some sort of motivation to make an example? Is there some sort of motivation to use you as some sort of tool to groom? Like, what is the motivation behind it? Because to me, it's just disgusting and despicable.
Yeah, absolutely, it's crazy. There's 4 universities and colleges that I know of that were teaching about, using my full name, like, using me, and none of
Yeah,
the stuff is even still open, like, my, investigation's still ongoing, we still have ongoing lawsuits, like, nothing is a closed
yeah,
case. So, it's very interesting, to use these kind of, like, open cases. So it was, like, St. Clair College, Fanshawe College, George Brown, and York that I'm aware of. And one of them, even, they had to do an assignment on me as a conspiracy theorist or something. Someone agreed with me,
yeah,
failed the paper, and then someone else in a class like stuck up for me, and she got kicked out of the class. Like, it's crazy. So
yeah,
what they're trying to do is, yes, groom and scare these nurses into towing the line, into
yeah,
following orders. The straight and narrow, staying,
yeah.
doing what they're told, and if you step out, this is what's going to happen to you. So it's a big fear tactic to continue to create rule followers.
Yeah. And now, do you think this is going to be an ongoing problem with careers and things that are like have boards and are regulated by government entities?
Absolutely, absolutely. The regulatory bodies are our biggest challenges right now, and the biggest harms to these industries. They have so
Yeah.
much money; they are so corrupt, and they think they can put in whatever policy to keep people, in line. Look what's happening to the doctors. Like
Well,
doctors.
Dr. Peterson,
Well,
Jordan.
he's the most recent, I
Yeah.
guess, because he's the most famous, but I'm thinking of the doctors in 2020 that lost their licenses. Their
Okay.
licenses are
Yeah.
still suspended for being doing their job.
Yeah.
One of them was for, writing out adverse reactions they were seeing and following the protocol they would normally,
Do for
be
normal.
taught to do.
Yeah.
So he would, like, write out like the reactions he was saying, send it off to Health Canada, and Health Canada put him under investigation.
Uh.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jordan Peterson is the craziest example of a educational regulatory board overstepping all boundaries against a practitioner, because none of the stuff that he is being accused for, and he recently I listened to that podcast he did with Joe Rogan, so he kind of clarified a lot of the accusations. None of it has to do with his actual practice. Almost all of the things have to do with his posts and political and
Well, that's why you're under investigation. That's why it's like it's cool that Jordan Peterson is bringing this to awareness, but
yeah,
this is what we've all been experiencing for the
eh,
last 2, 3 years.
yeah,
It has nothing to do with our work, our work ethic, who we are. It all has to do with things we're doing outside of the workplace, like asking questions. I was
yeah,
talking about vitamins and things you can actually do for your health and
Yeah.
how to stay healthy to remove fear. I mean, these doctors were treating the illnesses that they were seeing in front of them, or they were writing exemptions for masks or for injections. Some of them are doing that, but a lot of the posts, like for us, our investigation is solely on outside of the workplace, on our social media posts, and attending certain events.
Eh,
And I mean, our College of Nurses in 2020 was the first one to silence, the first regulatory body to silence. And they said, nurses are not allowed to speak out on masks, anti vaccination, social distancing, or any public health measures, or they will be reprimanded and their license may be revoked. And that was back in
that
2020.
that's fucking ridiculous. Like that, like I can't even put my face like, and it's coming from like it's hard for me to fathom this kind of restriction because like everything I do is virtually unregulated, right? And in terms like I like when I fight, I obviously have to get a fight license and I have to do medicals to get cleared, but like it's a fight, right? When I'm working with martial arts, your skill level and depends on all that stuff. And in terms of fitness, it's probably this is why I love it. It's one of the most unregulated industries on the planet. So in terms of free market, it pretty much dictates how well you do, right? Um, and now you look at what's going on in other industries and it almost seems like it was first it was big corporations, like if you worked for Google, whatever, they were kind of being like, "This is your conduct outside of the workplace." And you're like, "Well, I only signed up to like, when I'm here. That's what the like when I'm doing my job, I understand there has to be a conduct, right? But unless I'm a piece of shit outside of that, like, I should be able to live my life and express myself freely no matter what my beliefs are. Like, I don't care if you're pro-mask, like that crazy lady in Ottawa, that one that goes on everything, or the anti or I like to me, it doesn't matter. Like, you should be able like, if you work a job and I come and you're pleasant and you do your job and you take care of me and, like, for in your case, you take care of babies, you make sure that they're healthy, you do what you're supposed to do. I couldn't give a flying shit what you do in your personal life because that's
Mhm.
your personal life, and it seems like regulatory bodies and corporations are now trying to cross the personal threshold, of of your personal life. Like you can no longer use the internet without repercussions for your actual physical job, whether it be as a nurse or whether it be working for Google. You actually have to like be very careful of what you say, which is hard for me, which is why I can do a thing like this because I can just fuck off and do whatever I want. But it's hard for me. How hard is it for you to kind of fathom that those lines are now drawn and you're gonna have a hard time being able to just be yourself.
Well, I made that decision very early when I decided to post
Yeah,
the freedom rally because I said, I can't do this anymore. It's killing my soul. I can't be a part of this lie. I can't be a part of this corruption. It was years in the making. I wanted out when I started seeing the harms and things that we were doing that I was uncovering and learning about. So it was just that final push. It was way harder to stay silent than speaking out, and I made that choice of, I will not be silenced and hide behind a lie. I will speak out. And, like, especially when I had parents coming to me and telling me their 6-year-old was pretending to cut themselves with credit cards. Like they were talking about how they hated their lives and wanted to die. And I was like, I can't stay silent when there's all these harms taking place that no one wants to acknowledge, like,
yeah.
the mental health, the suicides, the business collapse, all the things we know about in the last 3 years. And to me, it was just more important to speak out and help, and I didn't want to be a part of that lie. So no regulatory body or anyone was going to silence me
Yeah.
into causing harm. Mhm.
Now that obviously came with repercussions in terms of lawsuits and all different kind of things, which,
Mhm.
people who are, crazy would be like the attitude of most Canadians right now is like, okay, they got their sense of freedom back. Lockdowns are gone. So for people who have done what you have done and taken those personal risks, because you've taken tremendous personal risk at the detriment of your husband, your family, and their well being, and being able. They'd be like, oh well, at this point now, everyone's like, well, I'm getting my freedom back, whatever. Does it kind of bother you that like the general attitude, except for the ones that have been paying attention the whole time, is like whatever towards, people like you who have kind of put everything on the line to stand up for those fundamental rights and freedoms?
Yes and no. I feel everyone has suffered in their own way. Mine just so happened to be very public.
Yeah.
But I feel everyone took a hit, whether, it was their own job, their family, relationships, loved ones, whatever it was. Just, I know there's so many people that went through their own hardships and it just wasn't publicized. Um, so, a lot of people, they do just want to get on their lives. Like I said, like we're getting to 3 years
Yeah.
of this. Like it's trying to figure out, even for myself, it's like, I don't want to be stuck in that narrative or that part. Like I want to find ways to carve a new path forward to create a future for my boys and figure out solutions and
Yeah.
aim to live. But yeah, I think it's more upsetting for me that all these lawsuits and all these things are still ongoing,
Yeah.
because I want to just let it go and
Move on.
move on and create new. But it kind of keeps me like stuck
And
in that narrative.
and I mean, it can't be mentally easy for you as well, like every day knowing like obviously you got to move forward and kind of do things, right? You can't just like pause and dwell on it, but it's in the back of your mind always, I bet, nagging on you like, okay, I still have to deal with this shit. It's not gone, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I had 11 summons in 2021 for speaking out publicly at rallies. So for going against the Reopening Act of Ontario. Um, Four of those, I believe, have moved to trial. So those trials are still ongoing. One of them I was convicted for going to Easter Sunday service
Yeah,
April
the mask,
25th.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was convicted guilty and fined $10,000 plus court costs of $2,500. So that one's being appealed. And then still under three investigations with my College of Nurses. And then we have a federal lawsuit against the government for the Emergencies Act. And then we have a defamation lawsuit that we lost for the anti slap motion. Epoch Times wrote a really good article about it, explaining it all,
Yeah.
and why the judge ruled against us and why we lost. So we're appealing that. So yeah, it's just there's still like very much of like speaking out in 2020 and 21. We're still like the repercussions and the
Yeah.
ongoing fight is still
So
there.
what do you do kinda to kinda take your mind off of some of that bullshit that kinda that's kind of doing, like, 'cause I mean, like, on the human side, like, how like, I've never had to face that before, right? The worst I've had to face is, the worst stress I've had to face is probably, like, knowing that I have to go fight a guy in a cage in a day, right? Which, it's not the same, right? It's not ongoing like this. So what do you kinda what have you kind of done for yourself and for your family to kinda s you know, even though you have to deal with this kind of but kinda move past it? Like, has it been, like, faith-based? Have you guys done are you trying to get out more? Like, what are you doing to kind of help yourself so you're not going crazy dealing with all this bullshit?
Definitely, faith has helped a lot, lifted a lot of burden and grief or resentment. And I just trust that however it turns out, whether it's a win or a loss, it
Yeah,
is God's hands, and He is going to use it to glorify His name, whatever that looks like.
yeah,
So I have just surrendered it all into His hands, and there's nothing more that I can do about it. So that helps to give me peace. I know in my heart what I did. I feel good about the stance that I made and how I did it, and so
yeah,
I can live with that and move forward. My boys keep me busy. I'm homeschooling them, so
yeah,
focusing on them and their activities. And I have a really great community in London. We have a really strong group of homeschooling families, that we get together in the forest once a week and do these events together. And that's the other thing is trying to bring more community events in London. We have a redefining education event coming up February 18th, and it's just about alternative schooling and resources and connecting. And it's going to be a beautiful day.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. And then I'm enrolled in a course by Billy Harrigan called Traditional Birth Companion. So I'm
Yeah.
learning how to become a birth companion to help women have natural births at home
Nice.
safely and through the system. And so that is taking up a lot of my time and energy is just focusing on what's being created
So
and how to,
you're doing what healthcare practitioners should do, educating themselves. And
yeah.
like I wanted like I know like every time I've heard you talk, like people want to talk about the cases and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to kind of get that out of the way so we can actually talk about like actual health stuff. Because as somebody who is in the healthcare field myself, I call myself healthcare, and I wanted to kind of expand some of that. I get some of that knowledge from you. Like we have gone through these last 3 years where people have kind of classified, going to the hospital for X, Y, and Z disease, whatever the case, as healthcare. But to me, I view that as sick care, right? That
Absolutely.
that is like you go to the hospital. I go to the hospital when, like, for example, me, when I've torn some ligament doing something stupid in the gym, and now I'm needing fixing. Like it's beyond natural remedy repair, right? And now translate that to what's going on in the last 3 years. People are going to are starting to view hospitals as the place you go when you need help with your health, which is not the case, and which is why our health system is completely, well, they quote overwhelmed. I don't know how factual that is. Only people like you can tell me, but that's part of the reason why our healthcare system is as failing as it is because a lot of people don't really know how to take care of their own health and they don't really understand what healthcare is and who healthcare practitioner is to me. And I kind of wanted to talk to you about that because for me, I view healthcare practitioners as, coaches, trainers, chiropractors, massage therapists, mental health coaches, psychiatrists, all those kind of people who help take care, holistic nutritionists, naturopaths. Like I see a naturopath as well. Like those are the kind of people who help me stay healthy, right? So in essence of the word, that's healthcare, right? And so I wanted to kind of talk to you about that because that's what you're involved in, right?
Mhm. Yeah, no, exactly. And the hospitals, I think the only time they were not overwhelmed was in like 2020 and early 21,
Yeah,
when everyone was avoiding the hospice and staying home
yeah,
out of fear. But otherwise, it is overwhelmed now, but because we had a nursing shortage prior to
right, yeah,
2020, and then they fired all the experienced, skilled nurses by the thousands. So of course we are overwhelmed because they fired all the staff
yeah,
willing to work.
and they're not
Um,
willing to hire them back either. That's the fucking
yeah, exactly. So that's just kind of side note on that comment you had mentioned. But absolutely, the thing is we have become so disconnected over the decades, and it's on.
sorry, my hard drive ran out of space there, so now I'm recording on the cloud. So okay, we're good to go.
No worries. Yeah, so we've become so disconnected from ourselves and from our bodies that we have been conditioned to rely on external sources. That people we call the experts,
Yeah,
and we don't know what it feels like in our body, how to take care of ourselves, how to heal, how to nurture. And it's interesting because the only person that can heal, treat, and cure is the individual themselves, is ourselves. We're the
yeah,
only ones that can do that. We have to be willing to do the work. So, and that is through nutrition. The food you eat is super important, but it is
yeah,
through mindset, like stress, your connection with yourself, with God, we are spiritual beings. So whatever that looks like for you, there is a faith-based spiritual aspect to this as well. That's
Yeah.
just how we're created. We're energetic beings. And then to each other, we lock ourselves in, our work, our homes, our cars. Like we don't really know too many of our neighbors or people around us. And so it's getting back connected to all those things, and including nature, plants. But yeah, like health is so simple.
Yeah.
It can be so simple when when you take back that responsibility and power.
Yeah. And I like what I like what you said specifically about spirituality, right? Because I don't think many, especially in kind of the day and age we live in, where it's kind of ridiculed to be of faith. Like for example, like me and my wife are Christians, so like it, we often feel kind of like sometimes I feel like I gotta hide it almost because people, oh, he's a crazy Christian man, right? Whereas I don't give a shit what religion you believe in or what religion you follow or whatever. I have my belief set. And one of the things I can always say is like, I always give this example because it's a great example. Like for me, the worst place on the planet is, and only people who have ever like fought would know this. The worst place on the planet is when you're in like the third or fourth round of a 5-minute round fights, right? And you're absolutely exhausted, and there's a guy on top of you beating the shit out of you, and you can't do a goddamn thing about it, right? That's to me, that's the worst thing I can ever experience, and I've experienced it so many times in training and in competition. Um, when real life kind of hits me, when when you have bad days where it's one thing after another. I mean, you can relate where you had these arsenals of crap just hit you, and like you can. I always say to myself, nothing's as bad as that, and I always leave it in God's hands. Where my faith is like so solid that I'm like, okay, He will give me the strength to get through this. If I can get through all of those hard things, this is not that hard. I've been through the ringer with the physical kind of stuff, and spiritually, I just got to put my faith in God right now. And I think that many people think, oh, you're silly. How can you believe in? And it's not about physical beings or anything for me. Like it's more about centering myself, right? Um, and I think that's what a lot of people lose right now, lost right now, because it's almost against the grain to be faithful. You know what I mean? If somebody is uh has really strong faith in whatever, they can't really express that in workplaces. They can't really express that in general in friendship because of how society has kind of pushed it away. And I mean, a great example is look what happened during all the COVID stuff. It's like it was illegal to go to the places of worship, and I bet you know that more than anyone. You got a big ass fine for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I actually came back to faith in 2020 because of all this, because of the darkness I was uncovering and the things I was learning and seeing. I just thought, well, the things I was doing before were not powerful enough to defeat what I was learning about, just the evil darkness. And so I actually, yeah, came back to faith in 2020, and it has strengthened me. It could just keeps getting stronger and stronger and more convicted, more convicted. And once you kind of have that connection, everything in the world just makes sense. And
Yeah,
then you don't need to feel angry or scared, or of course you still get upset. We're human, we're flesh. But
yeah,
it's easier to find that peace again and to move on and to find that forgiveness, because you realize the spiritual attack of it all, and where it's all coming from. And it all makes sense. I mean, a perfect example is, I didn't watch it, but way too many people posted it on social media that I couldn't ignore. It was the Grammys. Like,
oh geez, yeah. I didn't watch it, but I saw that devilry that went on. Fuck Sam Smith and that bullshit. That's
yeah,
just
I don't even know who that is. Like, I'm so out of the loop in pop culture, and
yeah,
but again, way too many posts on social media. I guess it
yeah.
was like no
Oh,
ignoring it. But I mean, that's such a blatant attack on on good, on the light.
Yeah.
Like this spiritual battle that we are in right now is so real and so intense. And when you kind of have that strong faith and realize that this is a spiritual attack, everything makes sense. And you can remove that fear and all those emotions and just and find the truth and move forward. And it just, I don't know, it just makes it so much more, it, it makes it easier. It's still hard and still challenging, but it's easier to get grounded and have that faith and move
Yeah.
into that more positive, I guess, thought, if
Well,
that makes sense.
no, it makes sense, and like I'm not gonna say his name. 'Cause I have a really good friend who just went through something really tragic. His wife recently passed away
Mm.
due to cancer, and the one of the things that like when I went and I went over to his house when he told me she was gonna pass, and I'm like, dude, I'm friggin' coming over, right? Because I mean, side note, like there's a big disconnect between men that says you can't fucking go talk to your boy when he's in trouble. So I was like, dude, I'm coming over. And we sat for like a good 2 hours. And he told me, like, you know, even though she was going through all this hardship, like stuff that me and you couldn't even imagine, going through with our body, like the whole time she was at church doing worship, she was doing her connection to her faith was so strong, and regardless of how the disease progressed in her, that connection kept her going, right? When for the most individuals who don't have that, it ends up breaking them down significantly faster, right? Because like you said, it's a mindset. Sometimes illness to me is a mindset. If you think you're sick, you're going to be sick, right? There's a lot of times I work with people who think they're injured, and I'm like, you're not injured. It might feel a little uncomfortable. You're not injured, right? We can work through this, and you're going to be fine. But like you said, it's the mind is a big tricky place, right? And I'm sure you've seen this as a nurse where people probably come into you thinking they're deathly ill, but it's probably not something that's even that bad, and it's more manifested in their mind. Am I not wrong?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
how often does that happen, do you think?
Oh, I think more often than we think, for sure. People get, their imagination going in the worst case scenario and the fears. And I would say we would have seen that a lot the last 3 years because of the way the propaganda was working. Everyone got so scared with a cough, a sniffle, like these basic
Yeah,
things. Even people that kind of knew what was going on, I would get messages from them be like, "Well, this is happening now. What do I do?" And I was like, "Well, what would you have done 2 years ago?"
yeah,
And then they have to
exactly.
think about it and pause. They're like, "Oh, I guess I would have done this, this, and this." And I was like, "Okay, then go do that."
Yeah,
But, and then, just but yeah, manifesting an illness, absolutely. Our mind, like Joe Dispenza,
yeah,
uncovered this and wrote books and the documentary Heal and all the things, just how powerful our minds are and faith. And what a sad my heart's just broken for your friend and his wife, but and then at the same time, I'm just so glad they had that strong faith because it would have made letting go of both of them
a lot hard. Yeah,
like
that's what I mean. He surprisingly handled it super well because they both were on that same faith page. And like
yeah,
for me, like I was like, dude, I'm fucking breaking down just even listening to your story, right? And he's like, no, you know what, it's okay because we trust in our faith. And I think that's very important. I think that's very lost in society, especially with what's going on. And I mean, like going back to that Sam Smith thing, what even angers me, what grinds my gears even more, theme of the podcast, is when that whole Balenciaga thing was going on with the kids and the ad, like nobody barely spoken up, and it's almost swept under the rug. These are like blatant attacks on human beings' faith and like we said, healthcare. It's blatant attacks on that, and nobody seems to want to speak up. You know what I mean? Because it affects their pocketbooks.
yeah, exactly. It's all about the money.
Just follow the trail, and you'll find Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau behind it, right?
Yeah, so many more.
Uh, now coming back to the healthcare thing, because I know you were very outspoken about the vaccines and that kind of thing, and it's a topic that I don't have any hesitancy talking about because everyone gets all mad. Oh, they said vaccine or jab, right? What was it specifically that kind of, I would say, triggered you in terms of something was wrong here with what they were pushing?
Oh, well, I just knew because I knew the lies behind childhood immunization. So, I was not quite aware yet, but with my first son, he was born in 2015, and I started finally questioning things, but I wasn't convicted enough and hadn't done the work. And he got injections up until 18 months,
Yeah,
until I finally like was convicted and my beliefs had done enough work and was like, no more. My second son, born in um, 2018, has had absolutely zero, nothing, nothing.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, Currently actually having the chickenpox right now, which I think is awesome, which, we get to see it, but I'm excited for him, and he's a
yeah.
champ and, not at all,
Getting
like,
rid of getting rid of it early, I guess, right? Getting
yeah, and boosting that immune system,
Yeah,
strengthening his immune system, all that, beautiful things going into that next phase of, development. Anyways, beautiful things happening with it, but, um, yeah, so I just knew, and really it came down to I had learned about germ theory versus terrain. What
yeah,
do viruses exist outside? What are they? So I had just done so much work around that topic where um, the injections are just so unnecessary to me. Why put all these chemicals into my body when there's like other things I can do with my health to protect myself? I don't need poison and all these chemicals to keep me healthy when I can do that on my own. Plus,
yeah,
I don't believe I guess I'll just like it's controversial, but like I don't
yeah,
believe that viruses exist outside of us and that we catch viruses. I don't believe in contagion. So even, bringing up chickenpox, it's a really hard one for people to understand.
yeah.
But that goes to like resonance. That's a whole other big topic. But so I just they just weren't necessary. Why would I inject myself with this man-made poison?
Yeah.
What are they trying to do to us? And
So,
why are they going to harm us when it's just not at all necessary?
so going back to what you just said about not believing in viruses outside, what do you kind of mean by that? Like, what is your kind of reasoning behind that methodology and thought process?
I studied it for like deep for years. Like there's so many books, podcasts, and lectures, and just
Yeah,
studies, and all these things that I looked at. And a lot of times, it's things happening to us. Like there's toxicity around us, like poison that's
yeah,
happening that's causing an illness or a disease, or it's our body detoxing from something. Like the flu is our body detoxing and naturally healing and repairing itself and getting all the crap out of our body, and genetically upgrading us and making us stronger. And sometimes that is very hard to go through depending on how much crap needs to get out of our body. It can be very debilitating
Now,
and
now
very sick.
would those processes not need some sort of stimulus to 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 make those things happen?
Just like our body is amazing at healing and wanting to be in balance. And when it gets to a point where it's like, okay, there's too much going on, we need to clear this out. Let's detox. Let's get rid of this. There's things going on in the atmosphere that we need to genetically upgrade for and get ready for this. New change in our atmosphere. Okay, so we're going to do this. So it's just our natural response to things happening in our environment. It's I'll be honest, I was like, it's getting a little later for me in the evening, and I was like, this is a big topic, and I'm not going to say all the all the right things. But
Yeah.
looking at all the resources and books for places to start, like the probably the most recent one is Thomas Cowan's book on the contagion myth. And
Okay.
that one is the most recent, and it talks about what we experienced the last 2 years. But there's goodbye germ theory, virus mania, what really makes us ill, all fabulous books and places to start. This is my favorite one for
Okay.
kids, for me parents. I had this one out. Um,
Okay.
this one's vaccines, autoimmunity, and the changing nature of childhood illness. And that's another Thomas Cowan one. That
Yeah.
one's like my favorite book for all parents.
Well, going back to the kids' vaccinations, I have I have to agree with you in what you said there because my wife did her digging herself, and one of the things we noticed with my 3-year-old was he had zero issues at all when he was born in terms of his immunity and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until we started getting those immunizations, the ones that you're supposed to always get and get the card and check off. We noticed, he started getting skin problems and, getting allergic to things. We're like, where are these things coming from? And, as my wife did her research and she like drew her foot in the sand, she said, Ashton, we're done. We're done with those. Right. And at first I I wouldn't say I pushed back, but I'm like, "What's your reasoning?" And she presented the reasoning to me, and I'm like, "Okay, it's valid." And also at the same time, given what has happened in the last 3 years, you know, my wife has every right to feel that way, right? And has every right to present that. Now we're a united front on that. And this is where, the pandemic caused a lot of rifts in certain families that I know of where one person away. But that's besides the point. But my point being is like it's gone to a point now where talking about these things, whether it be within your house or with other people, has gotten so taboo, and automatically get labeled anti this, right? When really it's just I'm asking questions, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not like if someone wants to take the vaccine, I don't give a fuck. Take the vaccine. It's your choice, right? If someone doesn't want to take it, okay, great. It's your choice. I'm so dumbfounded by the fact that it's become a question now. Like, have you taken it? Like, so if someone asks me, I'll say, no, it's none of your fucking business. Who cares? Like, it doesn't change who I am as a person. Like, those are like physical decisions. And like, we've gone to this point now where, like, when we were talking about vaccinations, where like, if you question the efficacy of them, you automatically become this conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
And and I'm not saying they don't work for certain vaccinations for certain things. Yes, they do prevent certain things, but at the same time, what are the long-term effects, side effects that we have almost been ignoring, right? And I think that has been pronounced more with this latest vaccination, where
Yeah.
when we ask the question, we're get regardless of what side, like, I know people who are team vax, but they still ask the question, they're like, "Oh, no, you're a conspiracy theorist." Why have we got as a healthcare why have we gone to this point where asking about this medical supposed to be medical science vaccine to cure everything automatically makes you anti-science, anti-vax, anti-whatever, when really we're just like, I'm just asking out of concern for other people because I'm sure tons of people who have taken the vaccine, and I wanna know in case those people get ill, I don't want them to suffer. I want there to be a solution for them to get better so that we can move past this, right? Why has this kind of been the predominant theme in healthcare?
Money again.
Yeah,
Greed. They don't want their lie to unravel. And I know you said you weren't going to say it, but I'll say it. There is not one single vaccine, especially childhood immunization, that I believe in anymore. I don't
yeah,
think that any of them are necessary, nor are any of them without significant risk. But I think like, and that's when I did start finally questioning and realized I wasn't allowed to question, and the looks I would get or the statements, I was like, there is a problem here. We're
yeah,
not to discuss any other pharmaceutical, any other medication, any other procedure we can discuss, we can debate, we can have a choice in, but not this one.
yeah,
Why is that?
yeah,
Um,
and that's what set off my red flags too.
yes,
Like,
it's serious. Like, why can't we have a conversation about this without the labels, without the name calling, without the looks? Like, and why is it forced upon us? And it just has to do with I think just the money, the greed, and that none of these companies have liabilities. And if it were found out that it does actually cause harm, that these harms are because of these things, like holy, the lawsuits and the trouble and the yeah, I guess the legalities of it all.
Well,
Um,
correct me if I'm wrong. Under the emergency authorization, do people lose the right to sue?
well, there no vaccine company is liable. They
Okay.
in 1986 it was called the Act, and vaccine companies cannot be held liable for anything.
So if someone was to experience an adverse side effect and they wanted to directly sue the manufacturer, they couldn't do that under the emergency because it was emergency authorized, correct?
Well, because of that, but also because of this act that was put in place in 1986
Okay.
that removed all liability. So the fact that yeah, I was under emergency act or whatever it was at that time, yes, but also because no vaccine company is liable for their product. So that's why you have things like theirs, and Canada just opened up their adverse reaction system, whatever it's called, this past year or last year.
Yeah.
That comes from taxpayers' money. And I
Yeah.
think theirs has paid out over $4 billion, but that
A
doesn't come
lot.
from pharmaceutical companies.
No, no, and they're protected in all of this, right?
They're all protected. Yeah.
And I think that that's something that people should definitely wake up to. Like one of the things that kind of bugged me, and I'm not gonna say his name because I actually like the doctor. He helps out my back a lot, right? So I was I was going to get a treatment on my back done a couple weeks ago, and I expressed to him that I use the CBD oil religiously, right? If I didn't use it, I wouldn't be competing or doing any sort of athletics anymore because as people who know in mixed martial arts, this sport is vicious, right? It takes a lot of toll on my body. And I've had 5 or 6 surgeries now, and, the first 2 surgeries I've had, they prescribed me these oxys, right? And I used them because I was young at the time, and, you're like, "Fuck it, let me use oxys," right? You don't understand what bad things can happen. And I share this story because I was very lucky that something bad didn't happen to me. Because one of my semesters, I finished very early my exams, and I was waiting for my roommate because he was going to drive me back to Toronto because we were in Windsor, and I had the leftover pills from my surgery, and I was like a dumb teenager. I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna play Call of Duty and take these things," and I got extremely lucky that that didn't lead to an addiction, right? Because for many people, that's how it starts, right? It starts as like a fun thing, and then as I progress in my athletic career and I've had these different things, I realized what I barely escaped there. I narrowly escaped what could have been a life changing predicament. And then I started following Dr. Mike Hart out in London. He does a lot of work
Yeah.
with CBD, and Joe Rogan was a big influence on that because I had a big stigma against marijuana because there are some people I know who marijuana when you smoke it, you carry the wrong crowd, right? Sometimes, and so I've seen some people lose the potential in their life because they were hanging out with a bunch of potheads, right? So that stigma carried along with me. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. Then I was like, you know what? I'm going on this. I'm gonna need some sort of help in terms of pain, right? When I'm going through these surgeries. So I started using both the CBD without THC, and now I use the CBD with the THC, right? And I use that specifically, when I have rough days or training or whatever, or even like when I need to get a better sleep and relax. And it has substantially changed my life in terms of just how I function and my ability to keep going, doing all the physical things I do. Now, when I went to go do this back procedure, I mentioned to the doctor that that's something I religiously do. I use it, and it's kept me going. Like without it, I don't think I would be able to continue with sport. I don't think I would be able to be a great jiu-jitsu black belt. I wouldn't be able to do any of these amazing physical things. And he said to me, he quoted some study where, "Oh, did you know that it's only 2% effective, and you were better off taking Tylenol?" He's like, "I just want you to stop wasting your money. You don't have to pay $40 for the same relief. You can get the same relief from Tylenol." And I didn't wanna sit there and get into it, but this is a well-respected doctor, top of his field for in terms of back pain. And here you are recommending to me a natural substance that, used responsibly gives me zero addictive properties and gives me 100% relief anecdotally from my like it's not the same for every patient, as you know. It varies based on individual. I know some people who've taken CBD and they get high anxiety and they say, "Screw it, I'm not going to do it anymore," and that's just your reaction to the chemical processes going on. But for me, here you are, a patient saying that it's highly effective for me, and you're encouraging me to take Tylenol instead. I wanted to get off the table and say, "Fuck off, dude," but I'm like, I needed that treatment, right? But, like, that's like a prime example of how medicine is right now,
Yeah.
right? Where, you have very viable, natural, healthy remedies, and they're being looked at as negative and pushing a big pharma, "Here, take that instead." Like,
Yeah.
from your experience, that's how it is, right? I'm not delusional, right?
Oh, no, absolutely, that's how it is. Oh my gosh, yeah, no, you're not allowed to talk about natural, products or plants or teas or tinctures or whatever, like, it's all about heavy drugs, big
Yeah,
pharma, let's get them money, like, that's insane. This push on Tylenol, it is definitely not a benign medication.
yeah.
I've done a lot of rants on Tylenol and the harms, especially with children and everything, but
And that's specifically why I brought it up because I know you've spoken about it, and I wanted you to kind of expand more about why it is like what why is it so negative in terms of its effectiveness, long term effectiveness, and health of the overall body.
it can cause, chronic, liver damage. It really affects the liver negatively. It depends how it's used as well. Like if it's overused for, pain, it goes right to the liver. It interferes with your other body's, detoxing, um,
Yeah,
functions because the body's like, oh well, I have to deal with this Tylenol to detoxify, so it harms the liver. Meanwhile, for example, if you're a woman, then your estrogen builds up because the body's like, okay, well, that's a natural hormone. I don't need to worry about that. I need to get this Tylenol out first. So then you can end up with um, estrogen dependent um, over. I can't.
yeah.
Sorry. I'm not.
Brain fuck.
I know. I'm 35 weeks pregnant too. So and then I'm like, this is kind of
Oh no.
like tired.
Yeah,
So
it's okay. I can go.
words words can
Oh
be hard. Um,
yeah,
So, and then when with fevers with children, you're stopping the body's natural process from doing what it's supposed to do. So a lot of times, when if you are a parent that gives your child Tylenol, it stops the body's natural function, and then your child doesn't go through that complete healing process, and then they're sick again, and then you stop it again, then they're sick again, and a lot of times it's like, oh, like why are my kids always sick? Because you're not allowing the body to heal. It keeps being stopped and suppressed. It stops the body's production of glutathione, which is like one of the most powerful antioxidants and
yeah.
detoxifier in the body. Dr. Camille Preet Singh, you can I think find him on Instagram, but he wrote a book about it.
Okay.
The dangers and risk of paracetamol, which is acetaminophen. It's a really excellent book full of resources and studies and everything into why it is unsafe. And then he lists a whole bunch of resources and natural remedies you can do as well.
Now, when they say it's unsafe, is it safe in small amounts? Like if you're like desperate, like I'll use an example. Say your child's temperature is out of control and it's like 43 high, like the kid's gonna go into febrile seizures. Like, is it okay to use it at that point, or are there better methods to bring it down fast to avoid some of those complications with fevers?
Well, if it's at 43, that's high. You're in the danger zone. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
That's like even seeking
Uh,
medical
yeah.
help at that point.
So when we're talking about this, we're talking about just irregular high temperature, nothing like drastic in terms of
40 and below.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then even febrile seizures are very interesting because it just happens with your body's quick change in temperature. So some children are just very sensitive to their body's change in temperature and are very prone
Yeah.
to febrile seizures. It doesn't matter how high the temperature goes; it's just how quickly the temperature
Change.
changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Tylenol is not necessarily going to stop the febrile seizure from happening. And the important thing to know is, terrifying and awful as it is to witness and see, is benign.
yeah.
Febrile seizures are benign.
My daughter had one. It was terrifying, and
Yeah.
the worst part about it is like I just woke up like my wife had gone to work and then she had left my daughter in the bed and she was sideways. So I kind of woke up and like moved her, and as I moved her, she went into the febrile seizure. It's like I triggered it by moving her, and so like the first thing you wake up, you're like, "Holy fuck, what's happening?" Right? Like the first thing you're like, "I gotta go pee." No, that's happening. What's going on? Like it's terrifying to go through. But like as you said, once they go like once I called the ambulance, right? And they're like, "Well, you gotta just let her go through this." I was like, "Well, I gotta go pee." They're like, "The ambulance is coming." I'm like, "I gotta go pee." Like I just woke up. They're like, "You put her on the floor. You can go to the washroom. Like there's nothing you can do for her at this moment." And it's kind of like a helpless feeling, right? As a parent, you're like, "What the hell?" And my kid's like spasming out of control, but there's nothing you can do. It's just a natural process that they're going through to fight that specific temperature change, like you said, right?
Yeah, and it is scary, and we never want to see our kids go through anything like that. But I think once you have the tools and you kind of understand what's happening with the body, you're able to kind of respond and cope a little better, move out of that place of fear. Mhm.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to kind of like the last thing on this kind of topic I want to touch on is like I know a lot of people, especially athletes, not even just athletes, people who suffer joint pains, all that kind of stuff. Their first line of defense is always some sort of acetaminophen, ibuprofen, to kind of stop that pain. And I don't blame them because it's readily available and it's there, and the education is not there. But one of the things I noticed was, uh, back in the day, I had a well, I still have it. It doesn't go away. A herniated disc, right? And I was experiencing some really shitty sciatic nerve pain. And one of the things I was doing just to get to practice was I was popping Advils and Tylenols, right? I was like, okay, to give me this temporary pain relief. And what ended up happening was, is my gut was getting so inflamed.
Yeah.
Um, it actually ended up pushing on the nerve even more. Right? And the solution to the problem, lo and behold, was we found out that, stop fucking taking the pills, Ashton, and then it actually improved. Do you think that this is a common thing that a lot of people experience a lot of gut problems because they use these first lines of defenses for certain things, and then it leads to this chain reaction of um, imbalances within their gut?
Yeah, absolutely. It can cause, some GI bleeding, and and if you're taking ibuprofen, then it affects the kidneys and all the things. And you're taking more, causing the problem, and then you're in pain, so you want to, like, take more, and it's worsening it. But that happens so often. I mean, you see that a lot with acid reflux.
Yeah.
And usually that is related to an underactive stomach. So meaning there's not enough acid in the stomach. So and it's because when you eat something, the stomach has to churn and work a lot harder to break things down because there's not enough acid in the stomach. So it's working harder, causing things to kind of, splash and cause that acid reflux. So people want to take Tums or take, these antacid medications. And then what does that do? It lowers the acid in the stomach even more
Yeah.
and causes more reflux. You take more of these pills, then decreases the acid. You're in this like vicious cycle when and then that's um, stops absorption of food
Yeah.
and nutrients and minerals, become malnourished, and all these other issues start happening. And really, you just need more acid. It's like take some, apple cider vinegar first thing in the morning and before every meal, or even a little bit of baking soda,
Yeah.
and try to replenish that acid and stop with the antacids.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of like the same kind of example.
Anyway, I just I just wanted to thank you specifically for your time. I think this was a great conversation, and I just wanted to. One of the things, like I said earlier on when we were talking, that really bugged me was I know your story, and I know that it's being grossly misrepresented by people. Like when I saw that they were doing that in the colleges and trying to teach children that and slandering your name, I thought that was screw that. Like as a society, we when somebody is not doing those things, and the system is kind of taking advantage of them. I just wanted to, have the opportunity to talk to you and make sure that people knew that that wasn't true, because it's not fair to you and it's not fair to those students as well, right? So I wanted to thank you for coming on and telling your story, and I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully we can do it again. And I know you're 35 weeks pregnant, so you got a lot of busy times coming
Yeah.
up for you. But you just let everyone know where they can get in touch with you if they want to see the work you're doing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I'm glad that we were finally able to connect. I know it kind of was a long time coming, so thank you for your patience and
No,
for
no
giving
worries.
me this
No,
moment. And so, yeah, people can. I'm most probably active on Instagram, Telegram. So it's at Kristen_Nagle. And of course, you can follow me and my nurses at Canadian Frontline Nurses on all social media platforms, but CanadianFrontlineNurses.ca. And you can see how we are changing the future of healthcare. It's called Connecting Communities with Care. We're creating a national directory database of nurses across the country so that people have access to direct care in their homes, and we're looking at a more holistic, natural approach. Getting to the root cause of the issue and looking at the individual as a whole. So we're
yeah.
very active in what we're doing, trying to change, what healthcare looks like and what it means. So you can stay tuned to that. We have a lot of natural
Well,
conversations.
it's like we were just talking about. It's like
Yeah,
we are just talking about healthcare over sick care, right? Making sure you
exactly.
taking the right steps before you get to that sick part. We don't want to get to that sick
Yeah.
part, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. So that's what we're excited about what we're creating. So you can have a look there and hopefully join us and follow along and make this shift into actual health and wellness.
Yeah, and also before we go, make sure make sure everyone that's listening subscribe to my YouTube channel and all that stuff. I'm shadow banned beyond belief, so I need people to to just to just subscribe, like, share this conversations, and so that we can keep doing them. Because I don't think I think it's kind of bullshit that the real, I wouldn't say real, but information in general gets selectified now, and it's even going to be worse for people like me and you who just like to have organic conversation coming up with. um I'm sure you know about that bill C11, right? If
Yeah,
that thing goes through, things like I'm doing right now just wouldn't be
yeah,
fucking possible. So make sure we just kind of spread the knowledge, spread everybody's voice, and you know like you're doing, just love one another. Let's cut the bullshit. The 3 years was enough, right?
yeah, exactly.
All right. So thank you for your time, and good luck in a couple weeks, because I know that's not going to be fun. I've witnessed it twice, and women are awesome for that. So good for you.
Thank you very much. And we have to chat again.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening to the Grands My Gears podcast. Please head over to Spotify. Make sure you like and subscribe, as well as head over to YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and the like on the video as well. And head over to gmg podcast.com to get all up to date info on the podcast, as well as other special things that we have on that website.